And welcome back, everyone. Again, we're getting news here that, as we've told you before, obviously, the grand jury has come back, and we are going to be hearing from the governor shortly, and that at 9 o'clock we'll be hearing the actual decision that came down and if there's any convictions. Let's go now live to Jay Nixon, who's the Missouri governor. Here he is.
Dan Isom. Later this evening, the St. Louis County prosecutor will announce the grand jury's decision. While none of us knows what that will be, our shared hope and expectation is that regardless of the decision, people on all sides show tolerance, mutual respect, and restraint. Earlier today, I visited with some folks in Ferguson, and it's understandable that, like the rest of us, they are on edge waiting for a decision. But they are doing their best to go about their daily lives, conduct their business, and support one another and their community. I also spoke with a number of faith leaders late this afternoon who offered their prayers for peace and safety. Together, we are all focused on making sure the necessary resources are at hand to protect lives, protect property, and protect free speech. Several churches will be providing safe havens throughout the area to provide food, shelter, and medical care. Mental health providers have teamed up to help ease the emotional strain that these events have caused. These health professionals are working right now to provide counseling and other services to the people that need them. Law enforcement officials continue to maintain open lines of communication with protest leaders to improve the interactions between police and demonstrators and prevent violence. I want to thank my Director of Public Safety, Dan Isom, for taking part in these ongoing discussions. State and local law enforcement agencies are continuing to work hand in hand to make sure the best, most experienced officers are on the street. The men and women of the National Guard will also be in the area to provide security at critical facilities like firehouses, police stations, and utility substations, and offer logistical and transportation support as needed. This will help free up law enforcement officers to do their jobs effectively. In closing, I'd like to reiterate my call for peace, respect, and restraint, and thank everyone out there who is working hard to make sure communities throughout the region are safe and secure. I'd now like to ask County Executive Dooley to make a couple comments, and I'll call on the rest of our folks, and we'll be glad to take a few questions. The County Executive of St. Louis
and that was Governor Jay Nixon coming to us live from the University of St. Louis in St. Louis, Missouri. Let's bring in my panel again here. And again, 9 o'clock Eastern time, the prosecutor in the case, he'll be reading the decision from the grand jury. And then we also know that Reverend Sharpton, who's been ubiquitous in all these cases, he'll be doing his own press conference from our region around 9:15 or so. And there were satellite organized protests, I guess, or something that will happen around the country. Now, we're going to get into a second what happened in New York in the last few days. And I believe, again, re-energizing the questions about what the expectations of law enforcement, fairly or unfairly, are right now. And also the question that people said, and I'll start with you, Bill. People want justice, okay? And that's a hard thing to define, okay? Especially since we don't know as much as the folks in that grand jury room. There's stuff that was presented that we don't know, okay? So let's get that on the table. But in this elusive definition of justice, right? And clearly people of color believe that there's a completely different standard of how they're treating than people that look like you and me. How do we get to the point where the public can believe that justice is served?
Well,
easy question.
Easy question. Well, first and foremost, I mean, you've got to create public confidence in the system that it's going to work fairly and that the system is going to be colorblind. And unfortunately, you know, we live in an age where most people do not believe that the criminal justice system is in fact colorblind. Statistically, minorities are convicted of more crimes than white people are. The jails are more crowded and populated with minority representation than white people. And then you have the former mayor of New York City, going on nationwide TV yesterday and making what I think are very inflammatory remarks.
And if you could, help me with a segue with that, guys. Can we cue up? This was from Meet the Press yesterday, and you had on the panel the former mayor of New York City, just as Bill mentioned, Rudy Giuliani, and also Professor Dyson was on there as well. And there was an exchange, obviously in the backdrop of Ferguson, but also in a charged incident also in New York City that we'll talk about in a second. But this again, Rudy Giuliani this past weekend.
93% of blacks are killed by other blacks.
Let me respond to that.
I would like to see the attention. I'd like to see the attention paid to that you are paying to this.
The
white
let's not make
police
this.
officers won't be there if you weren't killing each other.
First of all, most black people who commit crimes against other black people go to jail. Number two, they are not sworn by the police department as a agent of the state to uphold the law. So in both cases, that's a false equivalency that the mayor has drawn, which has exacerbated tensions that are deeply embedded in American culture. Black people who kill black people go to jail. Black people who kill black people go to jail. White people who are policemen who kill black people do not go to jail. If a jury can indict a ham sandwich, why is it taking so long?
In a lot of ways, Mayo, there's the nub of this, right? Not for everybody, and you can't throw blankets over these conversations, but what the mayor said, you'll hear people say, especially if the cameras aren't on, and then on the flip side of it, it's like timeout. Now, I don't want to let facts get in the way of a good story, but whites who are murdered 87% of the time, it's by other whites, okay? Just like we use the other number here, and there is a difference, I hope, than somebody who's in a gang versus somebody who's in the police department. But that all said, we get back to the thing about the premise and the belief of justice, right, and the expectation of the public, because I saw a poll that was out today, less than a quarter of the people believe that what Officer Wilson did was murder if you're white. The number was well over double that. If you were black, they said he murdered him in cold blood in the middle of the street. So people can look at the same thing two different ways because of the baggage we'll bring to the table.
Well, you hit it right on the head. And when you stop, Giuliani talked about the percentage of African Americans that kill African Americans, but he neglected to mention what you mentioned, that the vast majority of whites are killed by whites. And also that most murders and homicides occur based on people who already have a relationship. So you're more likely to have someone who's in your community who may look like you. And the country still is a segregated country as well. So you tend to look at, if you go town by town, it may not be based on law, but most cities are still fairly segregated, or within a city there's segregation. The thing that's interesting to me is the fact that Mayor Giuliani helped to create some of this mistrust, because he's one of the people who instituted stop and frisk. He's one of the people who made sure that poor blacks and Hispanics were going to be stopped at significantly greater periods of time than whites. So you're more likely to find yourself in the criminal justice system.
He also said, did Mayor Giuliani, the following about, as it relates to his time in office. I'm curious your take on this, Dominic. This was Rudy Giuliani talking about saving lives.
Probably saved more black lives as mayor of New York City than any mayor in the history of the city, with the possible exception of Mike Bloomberg, who was there for 12 years. When I came into office, thousands of blacks were being killed every year. By the time I left office, it was down to about 200.
Do you want me to thank you, Dominic?
Honestly, yes. His facts are correct. I know that my friends on the left wouldn't like for me to say this, and I bring a unique perspective to this. Nobody went after Giuliani more than me. Me and him, we had relationships where we would do town hall meetings together, but we would also scream at each other at news conferences. Giuliani is perhaps wrong messenger, but right message. I'm sorry. We've got to do something about black-on-black crime.
Dominic, I disagree, because he happened to be the mayor at a time where crime was going down anyway, and crime goes down typically when you look at economic good times. So he happened to be sitting there then.
But if Giuliani was here, he would tell you that among the national cities where crime went down, it went down statistically more in New York City, under him and Bratton. You cannot argue with his facts about black-on-black crime.
Yeah, but you hit the nail on the head when you say right message, wrong messenger. Look, to the point that Richard was making before, when you want to know why blacks do not have confidence in the criminal justice system, when you get a nationally prominent figure like Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of the largest city in the United States, a former federal prosecutor, a former deputy attorney general of the Justice Department, to say to Professor Dyson, if you people weren't killing each other, that is a horrible way.
It is horrible,
okay,
but it's true.
It may be true.
It's true. And the reason why black people don't have any confidence in the criminal justice system is because in Missouri, you have a prosecutor that should have recused himself a long time
Well, we're
ago
gonna
from
get
this
into a different- we're gonna
case
get into a different
and
debate.
would not
Yeah,
do
okay.
so.
I don't want to
Look
go
at
down.
how
I
it
don't want to go
beats.
down that line. Not that it's terrible.
Look
okay?
at how it beats.
Okay. But-
Special prosecutor was
Right.
brought in.
Okay, but here's the thing. Before we go down to the prosecutor, current Mayor Andrew in New York City says, time out. Last time I checked, I stopped broken windows, and crime rates actually gone down even further under me. And whether he's just lucky or whatever, that's another debate. But this whole idea of you can't scrub out, you know, the stain of history of slavery in this country. No matter what happens here, this perception is going to be there. And maybe it's real, okay? Because you and I aren't qualified to say it. But the point of it is, every time a story like this happens, it's almost facts be damned. It's about, listen, let me guess, black guy getting shot by a white cop.
Well, but you just hit on the other aspect of color in all of this that we haven't really talked about. We were talking a lot about black on black and black on white, but blue and the different standards that are in place for police officers when they're involved in incidents like the one in Ferguson or the one in Staten Island. Is there too much protection given to police officers in this process so that, you know, it's easy for an Officer Wilson to say, well, I seriously thought that I was in harm's way.
That's a perfect way. I want to pick up exactly where Andrew left off on the other side of the break here. And if you want another example, we're going to show you what happened a few days ago in New York City in the dimly lit stairwell. And then I'll ask the table, what should or shouldn't the expectations of the public be of police? Are we expecting too much out of them? They're not supermen or women. Or at the same time, if you or I did the same things, would we get afforded the same treatment as well? We'll be right back with that after this.